Fabian is planning, excuse me, I'm planning on sharing this morning, but he's not here yet. So if he gets too late till he gets here, maybe he just arrived. Okay.
So you need to stretch out your intro and then
stretch out my intro. I don't have much of an intro, so. We are in Acts 24 this morning. What was last week? I was not here. Who was the Felix and what you studied last week?
Oh, yeah, wasn't it all the men? Not all the men. The Tribune saves Paul basically, and takes him to Jerusalem with a whole bunch of men.
Caesarea.
Takes him where?
Caesarea.
Caesarea.
From Jerusalem to Caesarea.
Oh, because there was a plot to kill him. That's why.
Then he
And then
talks
his
to-
nephew overheard it.
There was a mutiny. People said we're not going to eat until you get rid of him.
Mutiny, or I'd probably term that more as a rebellion, because they were probably never on Rome's side to start with. They were probably your more, can I say, your more radicals? I don't call them zealots because I don't think they were part of the zealot group, but they probably were not really on Rome's side to start with. We have something here we'll talk about a little bit later here, but you have the couple main power groupings in Israel at this time. You have the Sadducees, which are the ruling class. They are the ones who have the wealth, have the power. They are in charge of the temple at this point in time. Then you have the Pharisees. The Pharisees are more your teachers. And the Jews today will say Christians are a Pharisee group. Not Pharisaical group. They will say Pharisaical, but they're a Pharisee group. In the way we do teaching is the same way that the Pharisees did their teaching. Okay? A lot of back and forth. We have followed the Pharisee model rather than the Sadducee model. And really the Western world has kind of followed that model somewhat. But especially in Christianity, we do follow the Pharisee model. And so many Jewish people today, many Jewish scholars would say Christianity is a Pharisee sect. You will still hear that around today. You definitely heard it back then. We ran into that a little bit this morning, but you will hear that even today. And then you have the Essenes, were a group that said we're going to run away from all this merging of Roman and Jewish and this corruption, and we're going to run ourselves into the desert and camp out there all by ourselves, and we're going to have the holy nation in the middle of the desert all by ourselves. And then you have the Zealots, and the Zealots were the militant group, somewhat thinking like the Essenes. They're going to keep themselves separate, but they're not just going to keep themselves separate. They're going to try to kill and destroy the ruling class as well as Rome. But they didn't really attack Rome much, because Rome's pretty powerful. And if you're a guerrilla Essene fighter, it's not like you can throw a bomb into a place. You have to go in there and attack with a knife. You don't get very far until you get killed. And so they mostly would attack the Sadducees. And Ananias, who we talked about today, later on in his life, at the end of his life, he was attacked by some of the Zealots and was killed. They burned his house down. He ran away. He hid in a cistern. They found him. They pulled him up, or kind of cistern, a viaduct. Got him out of there. They killed him. And that was the end of Ananias. You have this constant four-way tension that's going on in Israel at this time. And then you have Christianity. And everybody at that point in time was trying to figure out where Christianity fits. What group is a part of? And today, Jewish scholars still continue to argue about what group is it part of, what group they come out of. And there's some things. Who was Jesus? Was he an Essene? He went out in the wilderness many times. Was he a zealot? Well, he had some ways that he talked almost sounded like a zealot. Was he a Pharisee? Well, some ways he taught remind you of being a Pharisee. And was he a Sadducee? Sometimes he said, give to Rome what is Rome's. And to God what is God's. And that sounds very much like a Sadducee. And so they don't know what box to put him in because he didn't fit in any of the boxes. He is borrowing some from each of them and saying, you're right here, now you're wrong here. But he's saying, come under the kingdom of God. So that's a setting that we're walking into today in the last couple of weeks. Next week, we have potluck and membership council, so keep that in mind. And we will get into the text. Acts 24. 5 days later, the high priest, Ananias. This Ananias is not to be confused with the two other Ananias we're talking about in Acts. The one was Ananias the fire, different Ananias. And the other Ananias was Who was he? Back around 13 or 14, somewhere in there. Anyway, different Ananias. This is Ananias, the high priest. And they went down to Caesarea with some of the elders and a lawyer named Tertullus, and they brought their charges against Paul before the governor. And when Paul was called in, Tertullus presented his case before Felix. We have enjoyed a long period of peace under you, and your foresight has brought about reforms in this nation. Everywhere and in every way, most excellent Felix, we acknowledge this with profound gratitude. But in order to not worry you further, I request that you be kind enough to hear us briefly. Just a little bit of flattery going on there. Just mild undertones of it, but you can kind of see it if you look hard. We have found this man to be a troublemaker, stirring up riots among the Jews all over the world. He is a ringleader of the Nazarene sect. Again, they're trying to figure out where does Christianity fit in. So they call it the Nazarene sect of Judaism is what they're trying to say. But they want to discredit or destroy this sect as well. And he even tried to desecrate the temple, so we seized him. By examining him yourself, you'll be able to learn the truth about all these charges that we bring against him. The other Jews joined in the accusation, asserting that these things were true. When the governor mentioned for him to speak, Paul replied, I know that for a number of years you have been judge of this nation, so I gladly make my defense. You can easily verify that no more than 12 days ago, I went up to Jerusalem to worship. My accusers did not find me arguing with anyone in the temple, or stirring up a crowd in the synagogue, or anywhere else in the city. And they cannot prove to you the charges they are now making against me. However, I admit that I worship the God of our ancestors as a follower of the way. Paul sees himself as something different than just a Nazarene sect. He sees himself as a follower of the way. And this is something that they had some tension with. You see it in a lot of other writings around that same time, which they call a sect. I believe everything that is in accordance with the law and is written in the prophets. And I have the same hope in God as these men themselves have, that there will be a resurrection of both the righteous and the wicked. So I strive always to keep my conscience clear before God and man. After an absence of several years, I came to Jerusalem to bring my people gifts for the poor and to present offerings. I was ceremonially clean when they found me in the temple courts doing this. There was no crowd with me, nor was I involved in any disturbance. But there are some Jews from the province of Asia who ought to be here before you and bring charges if they have anything against me. Or these who are here should state the crimes they found me in when I stood before the Sanhedrin. Unless it was this one thing I shouted as I stood in their presence. It is concerning the resurrection of the dead that I am on trial before you today. Then Felix, who was well acquainted with the way, adjourned the proceedings. When Lysias the commander comes, he said, I will decide your case. And he ordered a centurion to keep Paul under guard, but to give him some freedom, and permit his friends to take care of his needs. Several days later, Felix came with his wife Drusilla. This was Felix's third wife, I think. He had two wives named Drusilla. I think this is probably his third, who was Jewish. And she sent for Paul and listened to him as he spoke about his faith in Jesus Christ, or Christ Jesus. And Paul talked about righteousness and self-control and the judgment to come. Felix was afraid and said, That's enough for now. You may leave. When I find it convenient, I will send for you. At the same time, he was hoping that Paul would offer him a bribe, so he sent for him frequently and talked with him. When 2 years had passed, Felix was succeeded by Porcius Festus, but because Felix wanted to grant favor to the Jews, he left Paul in prison. Okay, we have an ironic comedy here. You're familiar with the old slapstick shows like Laura and Hardy or some of those, and I can't help but look at this trial in that light. You have everybody in the wrong positions. Okay, the person that's being tried, Paul, he's the one talking about justice and righteousness. You have Ananias, the head prosecutor. He's a professional holy man. His name means Yahweh has been gracious. How would you like to walk around with a name that means something like that? But we know that he is ruthless, he's corrupt. And he collaborates with Rome in order to, and sometimes even working with Rome to put down Jewish expression of faith. And we know that from Josephus and a few other accounts. So he is a traitor. He's betraying his own people. He's betraying his God. And he's a traitor. But he's the head prosecutor. Then we have Felix. He's playing the role of judge. But he lives for a bribe. He's controlled by lust and greed and violence. And just 2 years after this, he's actually put on trial in Rome for his crimes, and it's only because of some powerful friends that he escaped with his life, and he was put back here in power again. During this time when Felix was in control, the whole country, the whole region there just kind of went into chaos and went into a lot of crime. The mob was in control. I mean, he's a mobster, but he's the judge. So you understand how it's kind of a comedy going on here. And I think the point that Luke is trying to make here is the wrong person's on trial. And so we have, in reality, Felix is the one on trial, and he gets plagued in his conscience when Paul talks about holy living, right living, and the judgment, the true judgment, not this sham trial, but the true judgment that's going to come. And the Holy Spirit is convicting Felix through his conscience. So yes, the wrong person's on trial in reality. It looks like the wrong person on trial, but in reality, in the present, it looks like the wrong person on trial, but in reality, Felix is the one on trial. And Ananias may be grouped in with him. Will they do what is right, do what is just, as it says, do what is righteousness, self-control, and judgment. Paul talks about these things. Felix was afraid and said, that's enough for now. I'm scared. Get out of here. I'll call you for you when I feel like it. So we have this ironic comedy sham trial going on here. Okay, let's look at the text a little bit. First of all, Ananias, he's a wealthy collaborator. He is extremely wealthy. He has taken his connections. You could say he's the mob boss. He's taken his connections to make himself wealthy, to get rid of any dissenters, to isolate him from the struggles of the population around him, and to guard him against the zealots, because the zealots want him dead. They want him dead very badly. And if they have a chance, he's going to have a knife in his chest. Tertullus, he's a lawyer or orator. Depends on your translation. I had a better translation there. I'm not sure how the ESV says it. Is orator. A lawyer is somebody who knows law really well. And you see lawyers mentioned a number of times in Israel, especially in Israel. It's somebody who studies the law. And not just studies it, they're actually scribes. They're copying the law over and over and over again. And if you're writing the law down a number of times, eventually you get to know it very, very well. And so he is more of a orator, somebody who can speak well, rather than an expert at law. And so he is a little interesting person to put in here. He is not the kind of lawyers that Jesus confronted just a few years prior. This is somebody that, because of the elite status of Sanhedrin, they are not trying to understand the law. They're trying to create the law, do what they want to say. And so they're calling an orator in to represent them. And in verse 2, just some mild undertones of flattery. It's not a bad way of getting somebody that's corrupt to do what you want them to do, is flatter them a little bit. We see that today as well. And just some mild undertones. Nothing serious, just this long piece and most excellent Felix. Yeah, just some mild tones of flattery going on here, as they're trying to get Felix on their side. Probably they would be better off just bribing him. I don't know why they didn't. That probably would have been a lot more beneficial to their case. He says, we found this troublemaker stirring up riots. Is that true? Well, I'm going to say from their point of view, it absolutely is true. Because they're saying, we had this peaceful thing going on with our religion. Then this Jesus comes along and kind of upends it. And Paul in his shoes, and now it was fine before they got here, so therefore it must be their fault. Even if the Christians aren't the ones who are starting the riots, because of this teaching, they actually started it. It's kind of like when two kids get to fighting. He started it, no, she started it. Nobody has the same idea. That's like, in my house, it's not he and she, it's she and she. But your house, it's he and she. Your house, it's he and he. Who started it? Well, you have to go back a week to figure out who started it, because that's where it started, and nobody knows. So from their point of view, absolutely, it's the Christians' problem. Maybe they're thinking more from what they want to be true, but we are all guilty of that. And they call it the Nazarene sect. I mentioned that a little bit. Up until 70 AD, it was a very common thing to think of Christianity as part of Judaism, as a sect part of Judaism, under Judaism. After 70 AD, when the fall of Jerusalem happened, that really starts to go different directions. But in the 60s, and this is kind of late 50s, early 60s, and you can argue what the dates are, you just start seeing a separation of the synagogue and Christianity. And they started meeting different times, meeting different places. That happened in the late 50s or 60s, but it's still considered a sect, a Nazarene sect. And then verse 8, he presents this do your own research statement. Whenever you hear somebody says, well, this and this and this is true, but do your own research, no, they're trying to pull something over your eyes. Okay, that's just how we do that, because we tell you what you should find and then say, now go find it. That's a pretty clear way of trying to get somebody to find what you want them to find. So be careful of do your own research statements. DYOR statements are often used to boost their opinion while guarding against dissent. And if you find something different, you say, well, hey, you had your research, I have my research. If they come back something different, so you always have a cop out. So he's saying, do your own research and trying to voice their case that way. And then if you have a weak case, state of the confidence and find a lot of collaborators. It's just human nature. We do it all the time. A lot of Jews joined in that accusation, asserting that these things were true. A lot of confidence and a lot of collaborators, and that will bolster a weak case every time. They knew that then, they know today. We can see that many times over. Paul, he takes a different approach here. He is not pointed do your own research statement here. He says you can easily collaborate that in this time, I know you've been judged for a long time. I'm comfortable with dialoguing with you because you know what's going on. But you can easily verify that these are the facts. For the last 12 days, I have not done this. You can check it out. It's easily verified. It's not just some vague accusations or some vague things and do your own research. No, it's saying these are the parameters and I have not done what you say I have done. He says, my accusers did not find me arguing with anyone in the temple or stirring up the crowds in the synagogues or anywhere else in the city. I haven't done it. And you can easily verify that that this is accurate. What he does is he takes control of the argument. And now when Lysis comes a little bit later, he's going to reaffirm this. And Paul knows he's going to come. And he says, when he gets here, he'll back me up on this. There's no evidence of the riot in the area of Felix's jurisdiction. And he also does that very clearly. He says, in Jerusalem. Went to Jerusalem to argue. He knows what area Felix has jurisdiction over. And he's saying, under your jurisdiction, there is no accusation that will stick with me. But if you want to go check with the people in Asia, you can check with them. Then you have to ship me over there. I guess that's one way of getting closer to Rome. I'm not sure. And then he says, there's no proof. You cannot prove the charges they are now making against me. There is no proof. So he does something here. Rather than just make vague threats and accusations, he lays out the framework of where the argument really is. But here he's laying out the framework from a spiritual side. He says, they call us a sect, but we're a different way. Don't confuse us. Don't confuse with me. They're not my friends. Don't confuse me with them. We're different. We're not trying to dethrone you. We're not trying to corrupt you. We're not trying to do all these things that they're doing. We're different. We are a different way. He says, I am faithful to the law and the prophets. I am not against God. That's what he's saying here. I'm on God's side. I'm not against him. And then he brings this argument about the resurrection of the righteous and the wicked. And you see him starting to turn the argument to a spiritual argument to plague at pull at their conscience. It's not fun to be a wicked person and talk about the resurrection of the wicked. It's not a comfortable place. And so he has a clear conscience. He is putting them on trial. He's saying, do you have a clear conscience? Trial there in their hearts, in their minds. He's putting them on trial. He's turning this into a witnessing event, not just his trial. And he says, my intentions were noble. I came to Jerusalem to bring people gifts for the poor and to present offerings. I didn't come here to stir up trouble. I came here for noble reasons. And I did nothing to offend. He didn't find me there. I wasn't creating a disturbance. I was ceremonially clean. Did not try to offend them. I wasn't creating a disturbance. There was nothing that I was doing that they would have a problem with. And he's making the case here that all the other thousands of people who had come in the temple during the same time as he was no different than them. He was singled out, but he was no different than anybody else. His intentions were noble. And then he brings this thing back, the resurrection of the dead. He said, that's the main question. And on this question, everything hangs. It is concerning the resurrection of the dead that I am on trial before you today. I'm being pulled into their arguments. The Pharisees agreed with the resurrection of the dead. The Sadducees did not. He says, I'm being pulled into their arguments, but I'm the victim here. I'm not the one causing the trouble. Okay, so the opening statements are completed. The court is adjourned in 22, and discovery is commenced. Normal things in jury trial or any trial, you will have the opening statements and then discovery. Sometimes discovery happens in the courtroom. Sometimes the trial is postponed. The charges have been read, and now the trial is set at some future date, and discovery commences to figure out what is the truth here. And so when Lysias comes, the commander comes, I would decide your case. I'm going to check on the data that you're all bringing me with somebody that I trust, my soldier, my commander. But I think Felix is giving some indication where he leans on the case here. He puts him in a house, allows him to have some freedom, and his friends to come and take care of him. In that point in time, if you went to jail and nobody took care of you, you're going to starve there. There was no 3 square meals a day in prison back then. You didn't get a prison sentence. You were held in prison until it was decided what was going to happen to you. And so he's put in this prison as a holding cell, and he's given, his friends are given permission to come and take care of his needs. So maybe Felix is giving some indication where he leans on this case, but he's hoping to get something out of it yet. And maybe, I think he's probably trying to show where he leans because he's wants a bribe from Paul, as we see it next section verses here. He says, I think I'm going to let you go, but what do you give me for it? Let's kind of bring this up. So a few days later, 7 days later, Felix came with his wife Jerusha, and she was Jewish. We got a little conflict here. He understands the Jewish system well. His own wife is Jewish. And he sent for Paul to listen to him again about his faith in Jesus Christ. And Paul talks about righteousness, self-control, and judgment to come. All the things that Felix was guilty of, Paul's hitting them one by one. It's almost like Jesus writing on the sand when the Pharisees bring the lady caught in adultery. It's almost like he's writing in the sand, writing down all Felix's thoughts and problems. And Felix starts to get afraid. Felix, the governor, the judge, is afraid of a prisoner. Who's on trial? maybe this is an indication of who's on trial. What do we talk about? That's something I thought about. What do we talk about when we come into contact with somebody like a Felix? Do we just make small talk? Or do we talk about lust, greed, and violence? Are we uncomfortable to be with? And let's not take this too far, because we can be jerks too. I'm not saying that, but are we somewhat uncomfortable to be with, where they want to be with us, but it's almost uncomfortable being with us? If they don't want to be with us, people like Felix don't want to be with us, that's a problem. And if they are very comfortable with us, that's also a problem. You got to thread that needle a little bit of they want to be with us because they see something there, but they also are uncomfortable because of their own heart, their own conscience. Felix does not have a clear conscience, and this talk of resurrection is terrifying to him. He knows which side he's on. He's not of the righteous. He knows he is the wicked, and he prefers having a good life, and that be the end of it. And so this talk of resurrection is terrifying. And it's also hard to seek a bribe and keep a clear conscience. And Felix is seeing this as well. Okay, some takeaways. I talked about this some in the past, but I'm going to bring it up here again. Inductive approach to learning, or the OCIA, observation, correlation, interpretation, application, that concept of learning versus opinion-based learning or opinion-based thinking. If we learn in order to learn, and we don't have an outcome already set in our minds, we will be a much better student. And as we see here, this whole sham trial, they had no intention of learning the truth. They had an opinion they were trying to reinforce. I should just listen today as well. How many trials actually commence where there is an honest desire to find the truth? It doesn't happen in the United States anymore. I don't know if it ever did or not, but it doesn't happen anymore. What happens today is both sides trying to figure out who has the better case, who can win this case rather than what is right. And we see it back then as well. We do the same thing with learning anything in college or school or anything we're trying to learn. Are we trying to find the truth? Are we trying to learn? Or are we trying to back up our opinion? Let's learn for truth rather than learn to back up opinion. And beware of flattery or those who are moved by it. Somebody's moved by flattery, watch out. That person is not grounded. They will go whichever way they want to go. You really can't do something with somebody that's moved by flattery. And beware if flattery is moving us. Flattery could move Festus. And people who use flattery are often the ones that flattery can move. So I'm going to say the Sanhedrin also was used to flattery and liked flattery. Jesus accused them of it that many times. Beware of flattery or those who are moved by it. And then keep a clear conscience. Don't base our conscience on others' opinions. Just because somebody says this is what you should do or shouldn't do. Let's not our conscience be plagued by that. Let us base our conscience on real law and clear interpretations of law. It's ground our truth. Again, if you have a good inductive approach to thinking and learning, then we can have a clear conscience. We can have a good, solid conscience. And the last thing is guard our conscience, or we will lose it. If I feel like something's wrong for me to do, I should not do it, even though everybody around me is saying it's okay. And even if it is okay to do it, I still shouldn't do it if it plagues my conscience. Because by killing that conscience, by stifling that conscience, it will be hard for the next time when something else is there. Yes, we may have to correct our conscience, correct our thinking or understanding of something, but let's not just destroy our conscience. Stick with our conscience. We might have to correct it, but stick with it. If it's bothering us, let's not go there. And we can see here where Felix still had just a vague understanding of what his conscience should be like. He got tweaked here, and he hardened it again. He walked away again. And I find it so interesting looking at Felix's life after this. He goes to trial very shortly after this. Yeah, his bribes and his money and everything else won out. He got released and sent back and to continue on his role. But he had a very difficult role from here on out. His role before was difficult, but this is very difficult after this time. This is kind of probably the last time he had a chance to respond to his conscience, and he hardened himself again. Okay, I'll turn it over to Fabian.